My name is Harlan Vance, and at 48 years old, I had spent 7 full years quietly keeping the entire operational engine of Brightline Technologies running. I was the senior systems integration specialist, the person who made sure that complex software platforms, international databases, and client networks communicated with total precision. But on a humid Thursday afternoon in the main executive boardroom, 7 years of flawless dedication were dismissed in less than 3 minutes. "Your work here has been mediocre at best," Landon Croft announced, his voice carrying clearly across the table. Landon was our new vice president of operations, a man who had been with Brightline for exactly 26 years. He stood near the wall projector, tapping a laser pointer against a slide that displayed my name next to a bright red downward arrow. 40 pairs of eyes turned toward me in uncomfortable silence. Landon straightened his designer jacket and looked directly at me. "I have reviewed your department metrics, and I see no evidence of any meaningful contribution despite your long tenure." A cold sensation settled in my chest, but I kept my face entirely still. In 7 years, I had successfully completed 103 major integration projects. Half of the core systems the company used on a daily basis relied on custom middleware I had designed and built from scratch. My solutions were so reliable and so deeply embedded into the daily workflow that people simply forgot someone had created them. They assumed the software ran on magic rather than meticulous engineering. Landon tapped his gold watch against the edge of the mahogany table. "Perhaps," he said with a subtle smile, "it is time you moved on." A faint gasp echoed near the door. Nora from Human Resources glanced at me with genuine sympathy. On the far side of the room, our chief executive officer, Radley Montgomery, remained focused on his tablet screen, apparently absorbed in an email. "I have looked over historical performance logs," Landon continued, pacing back and forth before the screen. "Your output consistently lags behind newer team members who have half your experience. Your technical initiatives lack innovation, and your architecture is uninspired. We need forward-thinking visionaries who understand modern frameworks." He gestured toward Nolan and Callum, 2 young, junior developers who had been hired 6 months ago. I glanced around the room. These were colleagues who had called my personal phone at 2 in the morning when server clusters failed. They were managers who had celebrated project launches with me and sent flowers when my mother passed away. Now, faced with Landon's aggressive presentation, they stared intently at their notepads, their shoes, or their fingernails. Nobody said a word. A quiet, steady calm settled over me. It was the strange clarity that arrives when an old chapter ends without warning. I gathered my leather notebook, capped my pen, and stood up slowly. The silence in the boardroom stretched long and tense as I surveyed the faces around the table. Finally, my gaze locked onto Radley Montgomery, who had at last lifted his eyes from his tablet. "You will understand my value soon," I said quietly. My voice was steady, dropping into the silent room with absolute certainty. A subtle flicker of uncertainty crossed Radley's face, but he did not speak. Landon smirked and made a dismissive gesture with his hand, instructing me to be cleared out by 5 o'clock. 20 minutes later, I stood in my cubicle, placing my personal belongings into a cardboard box under the watchful eyes of an internal security guard. 7 years of late nights, emergency hotfixes, and system upgrades were reduced to a framed photograph, a coffee mug, and a few technical notebooks. Nora from Human Resources hovered nearby, holding my official termination folder. "This is completely wrong, Harlan," Nora whispered, keeping her voice low. "Everyone in technical operations knows what you built here." I signed the severance acknowledgement without hesitation. "Apparently," I replied, "not everyone." As I taped the top of the box, several engineers stopped near my desk. Nolan looked visibly anxious as he stepped forward. "Harlan, who is going to manage the international routing protocols? The overseas servers update automatically at midnight. And what about the automated quality control matrix?" Callum added, rubbing the back of his neck. "Nobody else knows the failover sequence if the primary server drops." "That is a question for your new vice president," I replied calmly. I picked up my box, squared my shoulders, and walked toward the elevators. Radley Montgomery watched from his glass-walled office as I passed, but he made no move to step out. 7 years of institutional knowledge walked out the door without a single transition meeting. I kept my spine straight until the elevator doors closed. Only when I reached the parking garage did my hands begin to shake faintly. My apartment felt strangely spacious and quiet that Thursday afternoon. For 7 long years, I had only seen my living room in the early morning darkness or late at night after 12-hour workdays. Now, bright afternoon sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating dust on bookshelves I had never possessed the time to clean. I poured a glass of cold water, sat on the sofa, and took a deep breath. The quietness was almost overwhelming, a stark contrast to the constant pinging of server alerts and emergency calls that had defined my life for nearly a decade. My journey with Brightline Technologies had started 7 years ago when Radley Montgomery invited me to join his fledgling startup as employee number 12. At the time, Brightline had brilliant conceptual ideas but catastrophic back-end problems. Their software modules crashed continuously because nobody knew how to integrate disparate databases. I built custom translation layers, restructured data pipelines, and engineered resilient server architectures from the ground up. My work was never flashy, but it was exceptionally dependable. As the company grew from 12 people to over 400 employees, my back-end architecture became the invisible foundation of our entire corporate success. However, as corporate growth accelerated, new management layers were introduced. Executives who had never written a line of code or managed a server migration were placed above senior engineers. Landon Croft was the most extreme example of this trend. He arrived from a regional competitor with grand promises of restructuring and aggressive cost reduction. His immediate strategy was to identify high-salary veterans whose daily work was not directly tied to client-facing sales presentations. Because my systems ran automatically in the background without needing constant noise or public celebration, Landon viewed my position as an unnecessary expense that could easily be cut. For the first 2 weeks following my departure, I intentionally detached from corporate stress. I woke up without setting an alarm, took long morning walks through the local park, and reconnected with old industry colleagues over quiet lunches. I began updating my professional portfolio, reviewing patent applications, and considered launching an independent consulting firm specializing in enterprise infrastructure resilience. Then, during the 3rd week, my phone began receiving urgent text messages from former coworkers. Nolan messaged me on Tuesday evening to report that the international routing portal had crashed twice, leaving European clients unable to process high-value transactions. On Thursday, Callum sent a message explaining that Landon had ordered the junior team to modify the primary database scripts, resulting in widespread data corruption across 3 key servers. By Friday afternoon, an article appeared on a prominent financial news website. Brightline Technologies had missed its quarterly operational targets by a substantial margin. A major enterprise client had publicly suspended their contract due to repeated platform outages, causing Brightline stock to drop 18% in a single trading session. That Sunday evening at 8 o'clock, my phone rang. The caller display showed Radley Montgomery's direct line. I let it ring 5 times before answering. "Harlan," Radley said, his voice lacking its customary executive swagger. "How are you doing?" "I am doing remarkably well, Radley," I answered calmly. "We have encountered several severe technical complications since your departure," Radley admitted, after a short, uncomfortable pause. "The board has authorized me to offer you your position back. We are prepared to increase your base salary by 20% and give you a modest title adjustment." I sat back in my chair, listening to the hum of the refrigerator. 7 years of dedication had been wiped out in a 3-minute meeting, and now they expected me to rescue them from their own hubris for a modest raise. "That offer is entirely insufficient," I replied. "Harlan, please be reasonable," Radley urged, his tone tinged with desperation. "I was reasonable for 7 years, Radley," I said firmly. "I was reasonable about my salary, reasonable when others took credit for my infrastructure, and reasonable when you allowed Landon Croft to humiliate me in front of 40 colleagues without saying a single word. I am no longer interested in being reasonable." "What are your terms?" Radley asked quietly. "My terms are non-negotiable," I stated. "Triple my previous base salary, an immediate appointment to Senior Vice President of Technical Operations, total autonomy over all system architecture, and a formal written acknowledgement of my foundational contributions sent to the entire company. Radley gasped slightly over the line. Triple your salary? The board will never approve that level of executive compensation for an engineering role. Then I suggest you find someone else to fix your collapsing infrastructure, I said smoothly. Though I suspect your engineering team has already informed you that nobody else understands how those systems function. Furthermore, I have a second-round interview tomorrow morning with Lumina Systems, your primary competitor. Their chief executive officer has already made a very compelling proposal. There was a long silence on the line. I could hear Radley calculating the catastrophic financial losses of continued system outages against the cost of meeting my demands. Do not sign anything with Lumina until Wednesday, Radley said rapidly. I will convene an emergency board meeting tomorrow afternoon. On Wednesday afternoon at 4 o'clock, an electronic document arrived in my email inbox from Brightline's legal counsel. The board of directors had accepted every single one of my terms without modification. The contract granted me the title of Senior Vice President of Technical Operations, a base salary 3 times higher than my previous pay, full technical autonomy, and a significant equity grant. Attached to the contract was a company-wide announcement signed by Radley Montgomery, explicitly acknowledging my 7 years of foundational work and detailing my return to executive leadership. I signed the agreement, sent it back, and prepared to return to the company on Monday morning. When I walked through the front doors of Brightline Technologies the following week, the atmosphere was markedly different. The security guard at the desk smiled warmly and handed me a gold executive access badge. Instead of heading toward the crowded cubicle area on the 3rd floor, the elevator carried me to the top executive floor, where a private corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows had been prepared for me. Nora from Human Resources met me at my office door, holding a leather-bound organizational binder. "Welcome back, Harlan," she said with genuine relief. "Your full division is waiting in main conference room Alpha." "My division?" I asked. "Yes," Nora replied. "Technical operations has been restructured under your direct authority. You have 23 engineers, systems analysts, and infrastructure specialists reporting exclusively to you. Inside conference room Alpha, 23 engineers looked up as I entered. Among them were familiar faces like Nolan and Callum, along with several new technical hires. The room was silent, filled with a mix of anticipation and nervous tension. "Good morning," I began, standing at the head of the table. "Most of you know me. For 7 years, I designed and maintained the back-end infrastructure that allowed this company to function. Over the past month, poor executive decisions damaged those systems and disrupted your work. Starting today, we are going to repair the damage and build a far stronger foundation." Nolan raised his hand cautiously. "Harlan, is it true that the Aurora project database was completely corrupted when the failover scripts failed?" The Aurora project, our most critical client implementation, had experienced a massive outage during my absence. It did not fail because of the code, I explained to the team. It failed because leadership removed the primary architect without a transition plan and forced unauthorized changes onto a live environment. Today, we begin systematic recovery. Over the next 5 days, my team worked with intense focus. I did not sit in my new corner office issuing remote orders. Instead, I worked directly alongside the engineers in the development lab, writing code, reviewing database logs, and re-establishing custom middleware protocols. We systematically identified the configuration errors introduced during Landon Croft's brief tenure and restored original security parameters. By Friday evening at 9 o'clock, the Aurora project infrastructure was completely restored, running 30% faster than before the crash. When the final verification test showed green indicators across all international nodes, spontaneous applause erupted throughout the lab. Nolan and Callum shook my hand, while junior developers cheered. "First round of drinks is on me," I announced, and the entire team walked down to a nearby restaurant to celebrate. As the team laughed and discussed upcoming platform upgrades, Callum sat next to me. "You know what is strange, Harlan?" he remarked quietly. Landon Croft was quietly escorted off the premises on Tuesday morning, but Radley Montgomery has not interfered with your department a single time. He has not issued a single corporate override. That was a fundamental clause in my executive contract, I replied. Absolute technical independence. It is more than that, Callum observed, looking out the window. Radley seems deeply uncomfortable around you. He watches your office from the hallway like he is waiting for something else to drop. Callum's observation was accurate. Radley Montgomery was visibly uneasy. However, my primary focus remained on securing our infrastructure. The following week, I attended my first formal executive board meeting as senior vice president. Sitting at the long glass table among department heads, I presented a comprehensive diagnostic report. I demonstrated how recent operational failures were not accidental technical glitches, but the direct result of reckless management decisions that prioritized short-term cost-cutting over foundational stability. We must establish absolute transparency regarding technical value, I concluded, looking across the table at the board members. We cannot allow uninformed executives to dismantle critical infrastructure for temporary quarterly metrics. While the meeting adjourned, Radley asked me to remain behind. After the room cleared, he closed the heavy door and turned to face me. You made your point today, Harlan, Radley said softly. But what is your actual objective here? I looked at him calmly. My objective is to ensure that genuine talent and essential work are never again discarded by corporate arrogance. Radley studied me for a long moment, a shadow of genuine anxiety in his eyes. Later that evening at 7 o'clock, as I prepared to leave my office, an encrypted text message arrived on my personal phone from an unknown number. The message read, "Landon Croft was not just incompetent. He was intentionally hired to destroy your systems from within. Meet me at Riverside Park at 8 o'clock if you want the proof." Come alone, the evening air was crisp as I walked along the paved pathway of Riverside Park. Streetlights cast long golden reflections across the river water, and several evening joggers moved past in the distance. Sitting on a wooden bench near the boat launch was Audrey Miller, Radley Montgomery's executive assistant of 4 years. She wore a dark coat and held a small leather portfolio tightly against her lap. "Thank you for meeting me, Harlan," Audrey said softly as I sat down beside her attentively. Her voice carried a nervous tremor. "I was surprised by your message, Audrey," I replied. "What did you mean about Landon Croft being hired to destroy our systems?" Audrey unzipped her portfolio and pulled out a series of printed documents and email chains. "Landon did not act out of simple ignorance or arrogance," she explained, handing me the pages. "He was operating as a deliberate insider threat, executing a strategic corporate attack against Brightline." I reviewed the documents under the streetlight. The pages contained internal email threads between Landon Croft and external executive accounts associated with Lumina Systems, our primary market competitor. The messages detailed proprietary database structures, highlighted specific operational vulnerabilities in my back-end design, and listed key technical personnel targeted for strategic elimination, with my name highlighted at the top of the list. "Lumina wanted to acquire Brightline at a distressed valuation," Audrey continued, leaning closer. "To force a cheap acquisition, they needed our core infrastructure to fail publicly so our major enterprise clients would break their contracts. Landon was placed inside Brightline specifically to dismantle the systems you built and remove you before you could block the sabotage." How did Landon get hired as vice president of operations without thorough background vetting? I asked. Scanning the financial records, Audrey pointed to a second set of documents. "That is the most alarming part. 3 members of our own board of directors, led by board chairman Broderick Thorne, hold substantial undisclosed financial interests in Lumina Systems through offshore investment entities." Broderick Thorne personally forced Landon's executive appointment through the board, overriding standard human resources protocols. My mind analyzed the corporate ramifications. This was not merely poor management or executive friction. It was large-scale corporate espionage, a severe violation of the Defend Trade Secrets Act under federal law, specifically Title 18 of the United States Code, Section 1836, alongside a direct breach of fiduciary duty by corporate directors. Why are you bringing this evidence to me instead of federal law enforcement? I asked Audrey, eyeing her attentively. Because Broderick Thorne controls the internal legal channels at Bright Line. Audrey replied firmly, and I was not certain if Radley Montgomery was involved or simply blind. You are the only senior executive with complete technical authority and no financial ties to Lumina. I took the documents and placed them securely inside my briefcase. I will investigate this independently, Audrey. Do not alter your daily routine or discuss this meeting with anyone. Over the next 7 days, I utilized my contractually guaranteed technical autonomy to institute advanced security monitoring across all corporate servers. I did not raise public alarms or confront the board directly. Instead, I quietly deployed digital tracking traps throughout our primary database networks. I created 3 isolated bait projects within the development server: Project Cardinal, Project Sapphire, and Project Horizon. Each project appeared to contain highly sensitive, groundbreaking back-end algorithms, but in reality, they were embedded with invisible digital markers and subtle tracking code. Project Cardinal was accessible only through executive accounts. Project Sapphire was visible to technical management, and Project Horizon was restricted exclusively to Board of Director access credentials. If anyone copied or transferred data from these bait projects, my private tracking server would record the exact user credentials, IP address, timestamp, and destination network in an immutable security log. For 2 weeks, the bait projects remained undisturbed as my department continued stabilizing Brightline's core operations. Client satisfaction scores recovered, and system uptime reached 99.9%. Then, on a Tuesday morning at 3:17 in the morning, my private security server issued a high-priority alert. User credentials belonging to board chairman Broderick Thorne had logged into the secure server from a private residential network. Broderick Thorne spent 40 minutes systematically downloading the complete file package for Project Horizon, which contained what appeared to be our next-generation trade secret database architecture. By 8:00 m on Tuesday morning, my monitoring tools detected that the exact encrypted data markers from Project Horizon had been uploaded to a private development server owned directly by Lumina Systems. I saved the complete forensic log, digital signatures, and IP routing histories onto an encrypted external drive. The evidence against Chairman Broderick Thorne was absolute, documented, and completely undeniable under federal trade secret statutes. Armed with undeniable forensic evidence of corporate espionage, I requested a private 7 o'clock meeting with Chief Executive Officer Radley Montgomery in his office on Wednesday morning. When I entered, Radley looked tired, dark circles surrounding his eyes. I placed my encrypted drive and a bound report onto his desk. "What is this, Harlan?" Radley asked, looking at the folder. "This is the complete forensic proof that Board Chairman Broderick Thorne and Landon Croft have been executing corporate espionage against Brightline on behalf of Lumina Systems," I stated clearly. Radley did not look surprised. Instead, he leaned back in his leather chair and let out a long, heavy sigh. He opened his desk drawer, pulled out a matching folder, and laid it beside mine. "I have known about Broderick Thorne's suspicious movements for 4 months," Radley admitted softly, "but I did not have technical proof. Broderick controls 3 board votes in our primary legal firm. If I accused him without ironclad digital evidence, he would have removed me as chief executive officer before sunset. Then why did you allow Landon Croft to fire me 7 weeks ago?" I asked. Keeping my tone razor sharp, Radley looked down at his hands with genuine regret. "Landon moved faster than I anticipated. He manufactured that performance review meeting to isolate you. I could not block your dismissal without revealing to Broderick that I was investigating them. I needed time to secure alternative legal counsel. But I quickly realized that without your technical expertise, the company would collapse before I could finish the investigation. Bringing you back as senior vice president with total autonomy was the only way to save Brightline and catch Broderick in the act." "Then we execute the final phase together," I said. Project Horizon contained a sophisticated algorithmic trap. While the code appeared brilliant on the surface, it contained intentional architectural flaws that would cause any external database copying it to experience catastrophic memory leaks under live commercial loads. 2 days after Broderick Thorne stole the files, Lumina Systems attempted to demonstrate their tool platform to 3 of our former enterprise clients. During the live presentation, Lumina's servers crashed completely, exposing corrupted data strings across their entire network. The definitive climax occurred at the quarterly board of directors meeting on Thursday morning. 14 board members sat around the mahogany table, with Chairman Broderick Thorne presiding at the head. Before Broderick could open the agenda, Radley stood up. "Members of the board, we have an urgent corporate governance matter that supersedes all scheduled business." Broderick frowned aggressively. "Radley, this meeting has a strict agenda. Whatever technical update you have can wait." "It cannot wait," I said, stepping forward and connecting my tablet to the room's main projection displays. The wall screens illuminated with high-definition forensic logs, showing Broderick Thorne's private login downloading Project Horizon at 3:17 in the morning, followed by exact data routing maps, tracing the files directly to Lumina Systems. Beside the digital logs were financial records detailing offshore shell accounts connecting Broderick Thorne to Lumina Equity Holdings, a direct violation of federal trade secret laws under Title 18 of the United States Code, Section 1836, and a catastrophic breach of fiduciary duty. "This is an outrage fabrication," Broderick shouted, slamming his hand onto the table and standing up. "I demand an immediate adjournment." "You are in no position to demand anything, Broderick," Radley declared calmly. The heavy boardroom doors opened, and 4 federal agents from the Federal Bureau of Investigation, accompanied by representatives from the Securities and Exchange Commission, walked into the room. Broderick Thorne and 2 co-conspirator board members were formally served with federal warrants for trade secret theft, wire fraud, and corporate espionage. As federal agents escorted a pale, silent Broderick Thorne out of the building in handcuffs, the remaining board members sat in stunned shock. In the immediate aftermath, the board of directors voted unanimously to purge all compromised leadership. Radley Montgomery was retained as chief executive officer, while the board officially appointed me to the position of chief operating officer, granting me full executive authority over corporate governance, technical infrastructure, and operational strategy. Under my leadership as chief operating officer, Brightline Technologies underwent a complete cultural and operational transformation. We instituted strict ethical oversight, established transparent employee recognition programs, and ensured that back-end engineers and foundational workers were compensated fairly for their essential contributions. The Aurora project was successfully relaunched, client confidence soared to historic highs, and Brightline's stock price rebounded by 40% over the following 2 quarters. 3 months after Broderick Thorne's arrest, I stood in my executive corner office, looking out over the city skyline. I reflected on the morning when Landon Croft had publicly humiliated me, calling 7 years of dedicated work mediocre at best. My victory was not achieved through destructive sabotage or blind anger. It was delivered through deep technical excellence, unwavering patience, and the strategic application of law and truth. Sometimes, the most decisive revenge is not what you destroy, but the enduring, unshakable success you build after corporate betrayal.